Okay, we're back. We're in kind of the home stretch here on contracts. We've got a little bit more to go, so hang tough. Hang tough on contracts. I want to go to the next slide, and I believe the next slide for you should be something that says capacity, who can enter into a contract. And it says, what about children? What about the mentally incompetent? And by the way, the picture of the mentally incompetent, that's, Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter, okay? I think most people would agree he's mentally incompetent. Okay, so what about children? Can children enter into contracts? Can people who are mentally incompetent enter into contracts? And we have some special rules for both, and the rules vary a little bit between the two classes of people who are generally looked at and said, do they have capacity? Can they make a contract? So let's just sort of take a minute and talk about minors first. We have for minors kind of an unusual rule that says that for minors, for the most part, they get all the power. So let's suppose that a minor comes to you and wants to make a contract with you. So, and by the way, the age of majority in the United States is 18 now in every state, except for a couple of oddball things like the drinking age and some other weird things that are out there. But pretty much what we say is, we do say that the age of majority is 18, and you can do whatever you want that any adult can do when you reach age 18, with a couple of these little exceptions. Like you can't be a senator, and you can't be a congressman, and you can't be president of the United States, and you can't drink beer. Okay? So, when we're talking about contracts with minors, the minor gets all the power. Okay? So it's very dangerous for you as a non-minor to be doing business with a minor. When I say the minor has all the power, what this means is that the minor can enter into the agreement, and it is an agreement, and it is enforceable until, if the minor chooses to, the minor voids the contract. And when I say the minor voids the contract, it simply means the minor raises their hand and says, I don't really like that deal anymore. I don't want to do it. And you're just stuck. Shouldn't have done business with a minor. That's sort of the moral of the story. Okay? So, suppose, if you will, that we said something about selling your Xbox. You want to sell your Xbox to a minor. You find a minor. You write up a contract. You sign it. The minor signs it. They take the Xbox. You take their cash. Everybody's happy. The minor was 15 years old. 2 years later, they say, Xbox just isn't that cool. There's a different game system that I want. And so they go back to you and say, here's the Xbox. I want my money back. And you're stuck because the minor has the ability to void contracts. Contracts made with minors are voidable at the option of the minor. This is not an option that both sides have. This is a one-way street with the minor having all the power in this transaction. And the minor can do that anytime up until they reach their 18th birthday, and then even for a reasonable period of time after their 18th birthday. Now, I don't know what a reasonable period of time means. Nobody really knows what that means. But it's not like, you've got, because the idea is that you're, as a minor, you have no judgment whatsoever until you turn 18, and then magically you have judgment. And for that reason, when you turn 18, you immediately start thinking of all the things you did as a minor, all the contracts you entered into. You're kind of going through them in your head and deciding which ones to keep and which ones to void. So you couldn't possibly do that within 1 second after turning 18. You need a little bit of time. So you have a reasonable period of time after turning 18 to consider which contracts you'd like to void. You can also void them before you turn 18. Okay, so a minor that signs a contract at age 15 can void it at age 16 or 17, and even after they turn 18 for a reasonable period of time. So that's the story with minors. And again, the moral of the story is be very, very hesitant about entering into contracts with minors. I'm not telling you can't do it. I'm not telling you it isn't a contract. I'm just telling you it's a contract until the minor says they don't want it as a contract anymore. Now, there are some exceptions to this, so we'll go to the next slide. And we've got the three notable exceptions to the rule against the rule about minors and contracts. And those three exceptions are food. Minors can make contracts for food, and those contracts are enforceable-ish. Minors can make contracts for shelter, and those contracts are enforceable-ish, and minors can make contracts for health care, and they are enforceable-ish. And when I say enforceable-ish, a word that I made up, what I mean is, let's suppose, if you will, that the minor comes into the doctor's office and says, can I get a flu shot? And the doctor, who usually charges $40 for a flu shot, looks at the minor and says, gee, you look like a child movie star. You look like you've got a lot of money. You also look like you're not very sharp. Yeah, I'll give you a flu shot. That'll be $500. And you charge the minor $500 for the flu shot. And the minor says, yeah, I'll do it $500. That seems reasonable. I don't understand money very well. I'm just a minor. And then the minor does it. Well, what the law says is that, yeah, the minor can't get all their money back, but you also are at some risk, if you do business with a minor, that your contract won't be performed in exactly, or the court won't fully recognize the contract exactly how it was agreed to by the parties, but that the court will only enforce the contract up to the reasonable value of what the minor got. So if the minor got $40 worth of service, it doesn't matter that the minor agreed to pay $400, they're only going to get $40. Think about food. If the answer is the minor had a contract to buy, a month's worth of food from Grubhub, then whatever the reasonable value is okay, and that's going to be enforced by the courts. But if the minor got taken advantage of and paid more than a reasonable amount, the minor is entitled to that excess part back, and the same is true with regard to shelter. So that's sort of the exception for minors, and it's a little funky. Sometimes people ask the question about what about other things besides food and shelter and health care. Some courts in some circumstances have allowed some other things to squeeze in, but it's pretty rare. There are a couple of states that have looked at particular circumstances and said that if a minor uses a car for work, because they're engaged in trying to earn a living, that might be something that isn't enforceable. That is enforceable. For the most part, though, courts have looked at cars and turned down cars and said, not a necessity. Sorry. Okay. I should also add that the idea of turning 18 and becoming an adult, you can also become an adult by getting married. We don't see very many people under the age of 18 get married anymore. It used to be far more common, but getting married is a way of becoming an adult before you turn 18. You can also be emancipated. Emancipated is very rare, but it can happen. Somebody is emancipated if they are truly taking care of their own affairs in this world, paying their own bills, living separately and apart from their parents, some other family member or guardian, and are really out in the world by themselves. That's considered emancipated. Again, extremely rare. I'm just going to say, look, you're looking at age 18 to become an adult. Okay? Okay, let's talk about what happens, and this is really the big last push. Well, not quite last. This is the last big push. Then there's a little push after that, is to talk about remedies. So what happens if somebody? I forgot. We got to talk about mentally incompetent people. My apologies. Let's talk about those that are mentally incompetent. If you try to enter into a contract with someone who is mentally incompetent, but has not been adjudged mentally incompetent by the court. A judged mentally incompetent is a really important and unusual transaction that takes place in the courts. But if somebody goes to court and says, that Heckman is mentally incompetent, my children, for instance, they say, I don't know what's happened. He's giving all the money to, dogs that he finds on the street and tucking the money into their collars. He's nuts. He's gone crazy. Or maybe I've become a significant drug abuser, whatever the thing is that causes me to be unable to take care of myself and my own affairs anymore, someone is permitted to go to court and say, Judge, he needs a guardian. And when that happens, that's what we mean by adjudged or adjudicated incompetent. And that is, there has been a judicial recognition that this person is no longer able to take care of themselves, and someone is appointed to take care of that person's affairs. That someone who is appointed to take care of their affairs is their guardian. It's their guardian. Okay, so if somebody falls into that category, that they have already been adjudged or adjudicated incompetent, then that person is incapable of making contracts. And any effort by them to make a contract doesn't exist. It is void from the get-go. We don't have to wait for them to void it. It never was a contract. It's never going to be recognized as a contract. Whoever entered into that deal with them, that's their problem, because the other side can just walk away from it. It is void from the get-go. It is never a contract because that person is adjudicated incompetent. They have no capacity to enter into a contract. That's a little different than minors who have the power to void it. Here it's void from the beginning. The second category, though, and far more common, because guardianships are, not unheard of, but relatively rare, is that we have contracts with someone who has been, who is mentally incompetent, but has not yet been adjudicated mentally incompetent. For those people, they are permitted to void their contracts when they regain their competency. Or, if they are later adjudicated incompetent, their guardian is permitted to reach back and say, that person was incompetent at the time that they entered into this deal, so I'd like to step forward and void that contract. So again, the moral of the story is if you're looking at somebody and you're thinking they might be mentally incompetent, you just don't want to do business with them. It's not a satisfactory arrangement because it's filled with risk for you. That was a deal that you thought was too good. Gee, they must be crazy to enter into that deal. Well, maybe they are, and the court's not going to help you when you try to enforce that contract. So that's adjudicated or incompetent, and also what happens if we have somebody who is not yet adjudicated but is in fact incompetent. Okay, I want to jump into remedies and talk about these. This is a difficult part, so take a deep breath and step into it. With contracts, we're always talking not about how somebody can get ahead, but how we make them whole. Okay, you remember when we talked about torts, we talked about the potential for non-economic damages, for money beyond just what somebody had lost economically. We also talked about the potential of getting to the bonus round, to punitive damages, and having attorney's fees potentially in cases that involve gross wanton misconduct or in cases of intentional torts. In contracts, we have no bonus round. Punitives are not available. In contracts, we don't look at non-economic damages. We try simply to make people whole, and we want at the heart of it for people to get the benefit of the bargain that they entered into. So this first slide, which I forgot to ring my little ringer, the first slide says at the top, remedies-damages, and then it shows sort of two sets of ski boots. Let's take a look at this and kind of jump into how this example works. On the left side of the slide, we have A and an arrow that says $100 and B with an arrow that says ski boots. If you'll recollect, this is the way that I suggested that you diagram contracts. So we see in that what each party thought was going to be the contract. This is the deal that was reached. A was going to pay $100, B was going to give up their ski boots. Okay? But what happens if the seller, B in this case, fails to deliver the ski boots? What then? What remedies are available for the buyer that has been jilted by the seller? Well, what the law expects ordinarily to happen is for A to go back out into the open market, find somebody else with a similar set of boots, and buy them. And if they do that, and it's going to cost them $115, then what are the damages? The damages are not $100. The damages are not $115. The damages are $15. Because they always thought they were going to spend $100, and they ended up spending $115. Now, there is no requirement that they actually go and buy the boots because maybe they don't have $115. They really only had $100. But if they go out and find that the best they can do is $115, then they're still entitled to that damages of $15. Once again, what we're trying to do is give somebody the benefit of the bargain. A thought that they were going to have to reach into their pocket and come up with $100. That's what we still want to have happen, for them to reach no deeper than $100. And anything beyond that, that happens because of the breach by the seller is going to be the responsibility for the seller. So again, in this particular diagram, what we have is a breach by the seller, and the seller is going to have to come up with $15 in order to make that right. Okay? So let's go to the next slide, and we once again have the ski boots. We have the same transaction on the left side, which is ski boots are getting sold for $100. That's the agreement that's been reached. But this time, we have a breach by the buyer. So what happens is, I suppose this could happen with ski boots, they get cold feet because they don't have the boots. At any rate, they get cold feet, they back out of the deal, and they don't come through with $100, and the ski boots don't get delivered. The seller is still holding on to the ski boots, and the seller says, I thought I was going to get $100. They go out on the open market. The best they can do is sell them for $90. What we want them to do is get the benefit of the bargain that they originally entered into. They originally thought they would get $100. They only got $90. So what are the damages that are due to B in this? In this particular case, B needs another $10 to get the full benefit of the bargain. At the end of the day, B thought, I'm not going to have any more ski boots, but I'm going to have $100. So they got 90 of it from D. They're going to get the other 10 from A. So that's getting the benefit of the bargain. This is sometimes called cover. Cover means that you go out into the open market and you then either sell or buy in that open market at the price that's the best that the market can do. And you have to make a reasonable, good faith effort to do that in order to ascertain just how those damages are going to be calculated and what we're going to do with those. Okay? And I would say that this whole idea of damages and cover is by far the most common way to calculate damages in contract cases. Okay, we also have rescission is another form of remedy in contracts cases, and this is simply putting everybody back where they started. And you go to court and you say, forget about cover, forget about damages. I just want everybody put back to where they started. And this happens most often when one of the sides of the contract has performed their end of the deal and the other side has not yet performed their end of the deal. So suppose I've already delivered the ski boots and the guy hasn't paid me for them and says, and I'm not going to pay you for them. The appropriate remedy in that case might be, give me my ski boots back and let's just everybody go back to where they started. Okay, so rescission is a request to put everybody back where they started. The calculation of what remedy we're going to use between rescission and damages is one that's usually left to the injured party, the party who is suffering because